Thank you so much. It's very exciting to be here with you for this book talk. My name is Catherine. I'm with the Center for Ideas and Society at UC Riverside. And so as we get started, before I hand things off to our director, Georgia Warnke, for the introductions and the formal beginning, I just would like to begin by thanking you all for being here and taking this moment to acknowledge the caretakers of the water and the air and the land in the area in which UC Riverside and our co-workers make their home. And I'm speaking of the original inhabitants of this area, the Cahuilla, the Tongva, the Luiseno, and the Serrano peoples. We're grateful to them for their ongoing work. And we acknowledge our responsibility as co-workers here at UC Riverside to acknowledge their past work, to co-labor with them and their descendants in the present, and to carry that debt of respect and co-labor forward into the future. So thank you for taking a moment to acknowledge that with us. So without further ado from me, I will now hand it over to Dr. Warnke to get the show on the road. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It's great to see everyone here. I will now do what I do best, which is introduce people who are better known than I am. So our two speakers here are the authors of the book we're here to learn about and discuss. Are Ariel Dinar, who is Distinguished Professor of Economics and Policy, Environmental Economics and Policy at the UCR School of Public Policy. His research deals with many things, among them resource and environmental economics, water resources, water policy, and a slew of other things. Yacov Tsur, we're very pleased to have him here as well. He is Professor of Agriculture, and he is Ruth Oxburgh Professor of Agriculture in the Department of Environmental Economics and Management at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. His research deals with natural resources and economics under uncertainty, with an emphasis on water resources and resource management under catastrophic threats. Their jointly authored book, which we'll be hearing about today, is The Economics of Water Resources, a Comprehensive Approach. So Ariel, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Georgia. And I am going now to share my screen and to start the section. So thank you very much, everyone who came from all over the world, which means that some of you have to stay longer instead of going to watch TV or spending time with your families, and this is much appreciated. We are going to talk today about our new book. We have several books that we wrote together and we edited together. In the past, we have a long history of collaboration. Tsur, I call him Tsur always for many, many years, so this is his last name. Tsur and myself worked together for many years, and this is one of our products. We calculated that we have almost 100 years jointly of working together, and this is a resource that should be taken very seriously, because we have a lot of feedback from previous work. First of all, we have to recognize, and this is a pleasure to recognize, several people that were instrumental, either directly or indirectly, in that book. And the first one is Vincent Starr, who made a big effort and helped us in collecting data and converting the data to graphs and figures. Encarna Esteban, and I will mention all the three students, the former students of mine and visitors, Encarna Esteban, Edgar Tayez Foster, and Getachew Nigatu, that their work was used in that book, and with their permission, of course, and appropriate citation and everything that has to go with that. We had many colleagues that I will not mention their names that helped us also with data and production of maps that feature in the, and then several colleagues, some of whom are with us today in the meeting, like Terry Rowe, Maria Saleth, and several others that I will not mention, that we worked together jointly, the two of us, Tsur and myself, with them over the years, and some of the work has been reflected in the book. So, first of all, what motivated the book, or us to write the book? And basically, it is probably our experience and multi-decadal work on water, and realizing that in many cases, the questions that we ask in the waters, on water, in water using sectors, are better addressed when the answers are not only taking into account the water sector, but other sectors that are directly or indirectly related. We also realized that in at least, and probably not only, but in the water sector, policies matter. In many cases, the policies have good intention, but in many cases, they are also pervasive and lead to the opposite result that was in the intent of the policymakers. So, given that in mind, this was what motivated us to try and look at the water sector and other sectors in a comprehensive approach. And in addition to that, we have also realized that issues related to, for example, climate change and globalization have to be included also in any analysis of a water-related economic question. So what does that book, let me just, so what does that book cover? It covers several aspects, and we have 9 chapters in total in the book. We try to organize it along some schedule of teaching in different universities, for example, 10 weeks of quarters. So the first chapter is the motivation. It is a very large chapter that talks about different aspects of water around the world, and I will refer to it in the next slide. Now, first chapter provides the motivation for the book. Then we have 5 chapters, chapter 2 to 6, that are chapters that provide the analytical framework for the comprehensive approach, with focus on the water economy. And this is a concept, the water economy is a concept that features in our book. And then there are 3 chapters, chapters 7 to 9, that refer to specific policy implications and interpretations with the domestic and international economies of water. Let me just go over very, very quickly the content of the first chapter, and then I will transfer it to Tsur to talk about chapter 2 to 6, and then I will come back. So when we look at history of different parameters of water, we can see that water becomes scarcer over time, just because of the increase in population, and probably because of other things too. So if we look at different continents, we can see that over time, just because of population growth, we have less and less water per capita, and the three straight red lines here are indices that have been suggested of different levels of scarcity. And we can see that one continent, at least, has reached recently the range of high water scarcity. So this is one thing that was in the motivation for our book. Second is, and I show only one example, is that there is an increase in the number of droughts and floods. Here we can see only droughts over time. So we have an increase in the number, frequency, and extent of droughts around the world, not only in one place or another. And then another reason for despair, probably, in quotes, is that many of our groundwater reservoirs have been depleted, the big ones in around the world. So we can see that many of the groundwater aquifers have been depleted, and this has been intensified over time. So this is a good question. So what can we do? But we can see that there are also some reasons for hope. And one of them is that the number of reservoirs that can contain water, that can capture water, the number of reservoirs has been growing. Not that it comes without problems, but this is a technology and infrastructure that helps countries to bridge between years of abundance and years of scarcity. In addition, we also realize that the number of, or the urban sector has been increasing, and which means that we may have, if we know how to do that, we may have additional source of water, what we call wastewater, or reclaimed or recycled wastewater that we can use and replace with other sources of fresh water. And then finally, we can also see that there is an increase in the number and capacity of wastewater treatment facilities around the world. So these are just a couple of maps that show us what is going on. And then another reason for hope is that we can see over time that there are increasing number of domestic legal aspects of, or legal arrangements or water laws in countries. So which means that countries are improving in the way that they deal with water. Sorry, and then the last one is that international agreements between countries that share water, and this is also an important aspect of both globalization and international interactions between countries that share water, has been increasing. So that is part of the very quickly motivation for our book. There is reason for despair, but there is a despair, but there are reasons for hope. So with that, just to conclude and then to pass it to Tsur, technologies, infrastructure, institutions, regulations, all of it interact with changes in the demand and uncertain external shocks that affect water availability, which necessitate a comprehensive approach. And with that, I will allow or let Tsur now present the rest of the chapters in the book.
Thank you very much, Ariel. Let me use the opportunity and thank the organizers and all the participants that share this event. So I will discuss chapters 2 to 6, which present what we call the comprehensive outlook approach of what we call a water economy. And water economy, we do it in a very schematic, prototypical water economy. And what do we mean by water economy? So water economy is a hydros socio-economic arrangement that contains water sources, water users, the infrastructure that connects sources and users, and all the institutional arrangements, law, norms, allocation rules, and so on, that determine and define and provides the boundaries of the different allocation possibilities, allocation policies. And this arrangement, this concept underlies, gives the basis for our discussion throughout the book. And the idea is to present a comprehensive approach to look at all aspects of a water economy. So we have the three main sources: natural, recycling, and desalination. We have the four main user sectors: domestic, industry, agriculture, and the environment, ecosystem services. We put a lot of emphasis on the infrastructure development, and investment and maintenance, which is required to implement a water policy, a water allocation policy. And within this edifice, within this arrangement, we provide all the discussions and analysis. And basically, in chapter 2 describes this arrangement in details. In chapter 3 defines the costs and benefits that are associated with any water policy. Chapter 3. So chapter 4 defines a water policy. What is a water policy in terms of the ingredients that I just described, of the different ingredients of a water economy and the cost and benefits of a water policy. And then in chapter 4, we define also the optimal water policy, this concept. In chapter 5, after we define the optimal policy, we discuss and address the issue of how to implement the optimal water policy in actual practice. We focus mainly on pricing and quotas. We give a lot of emphasis to environmental and ecosystem services, though this is not solely. We look at all the sectors. And all this is done in a comprehensive approach, looking at all the sectors and sources jointly. Then in chapter 6, we address the issue of uncertainty that is inherent, that is characterizes water systems, water economies, because natural water is mostly derives from precipitation, either directly or indirectly through recharging reservoirs, aquifers, and lakes. And precipitation fluctuates substantially, depending, of course, on the region, from year to year and within, intertemporally and intratemporally. And in chapter 6, we address the issue of how to handle these fluctuations, uncertainty, again, looking at the water economy as a whole. And the main approach is to use water conjunctively. So to use different sources of water. Some sources are more stable than others, and to use the more stable sources to stabilize and smooth out the fluctuations and stabilize water supplies. So this is, in a nutshell, what we do in chapters 2 to 6. Let's.
Okay, thank you, Tsur. So chapter 7 is a chapter that uses two examples of regulatory interventions in the groundwater sector. And one of them is the example of the Tarifa Nueve, which was implemented in Mexico to help farmers compete with their counterparts from Canada and the United States. It had good intentions, but negative consequences. And the chapter describes the different features, regulatory features, and the political economy of the modifications, of the reforms, of the attempts to reform, using some interesting experimental economics components that have been applied both to at UCR in the lab and to real farmers in Mexico, and finding a proposed approach that could be preferred to the regular approach that has been used in Mexico with no success at that time. So this is chapter 7. Sorry, this is one part of chapter 7. The second part is the case, very famous case of regulation of groundwater in the La Mancha aquifer in Spain that attempted at using several mechanisms and showing a very interesting feature of what we call packaging and sequencing of policy interventions that basically suggests that lumping several policy interventions together may be more effective than doing it with one of the policy interventions at a time. And this is what was done in that particular case, and suggesting that water quota and a uniform water tax on extractions of water from the aquifer, if they are implemented together in a certain sequence, may lead to a more efficient and sustainable way of managing the water in that aquifer in Spain. So this is chapter 7. Chapter 8 introduces aspects of management of international water. This chapter is based also on, to a large extent, on the work that was done with Getachew Nigatu that I mentioned earlier. And just to be fair to the to add information, chapter 7, the case of Mexico, is based to some extent on the work that was done with a former student, Edgar Tellez. That part of the chapter, second example, is based on a work that was done with a visiting, at that time, PhD student, now a professor at University of Zaragoza, Encarna Esteban. And the chapter on international water was with Getachew Nigatu. I added some aspects of climate change, relative advantage, and population growth to the analysis. And this is an important aspect, the dealing with international water. And this is basically what we wanted to talk about. And I wanted to thank you all for your attention. And this finishes, or this concludes the presentation of the book chapters. And we can now turn to the question and answer part that will be probably led by Catherine or by Georgia.
Thank you so much. So, and thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Georgia. Would you like to moderate the question and answers for us?
Sure. So if you have a question or a comment, since there are 2 pages of you, if you would just raise your hand, you can go to participants and click on participants, and that should give you a way of raising your hand. Or if you'd rather, you can type your questions into the chat function. So I see no questions so far. So I just have a kind of, oh, yes.
Can you hear me all?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Getachew Nigatu. I was a former student, but still consider myself a student with Professor Ariel Dinar, and I really appreciate for your contribution, both of you guys. I have a question to Professor Yacov Tsur. You showed us the water economies and then the different interaction. Did you see any pattern of trade or any pattern of pricing mechanism growing or decreasing, and how countries are interacting in that framework? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. We have so within a water economy, when you look at when you discuss trading, you mean trading within a water economy, say between urban and well, we don't have in the book, we did not consider water markets or trading, but we have the extended pricing mechanism allows for different allocations to be traded between the different parties. So we have the urban sector, we have the agricultural sector, industrial, the environmentalist, and the policy determines the allocation under different circumstances, and the exact mechanism by which it is done is fairly open. We look at the book, we concentrate on the issue of how to price water, but we also introduce quotas. So the quotas can be used to deviate from a particular policy because of some constraints or limitations. And we don't particularly analyze the water markets. It's a huge topic. We prefer to concentrate on the basics, and we think that what we analyze can be used as a basis for water trading and water markets, but it is very idiosyncratic. It is very specific to each particular case, depending on the water laws, water property rights, the different institutions. We actually address this more in the case studies. So I think in the case of the case studies that Ariel discussed, maybe Ariel, you can add a little bit on that. We also have another case study that I present in chapter 5 of as an example of the Israeli water economy. And there we also look at the different allocation of water, for instance, from agriculture to the environment, but not in the form or in the way of markets. We simply don't have these institutions in this particular water economy. Ariel, do you want to add?
So actually, we do have it in the context of the economy-wide analysis in chapter 8, which, to my shame, I don't know what happened. When I went through the slides, I don't know why that slide didn't come up. So we have a chapter 8, before the chapter on international water. We have a chapter which is called the economy-wide considerations. And in that chapter, which is based on a big study that we were part of, we had a study that included several countries: Morocco, South Africa, Turkey, in which we included a model of a CGE model where trade of water between different parts of the water user in the country and international trade of agricultural goods was part of the model. And therefore we do have it, but I don't know what happened. I just went, when you asked the question, I went to check and I found that it is there, but I don't know why it didn't show up on the screen. So yes, we did have it in one chapter, and with examples from Morocco. Morocco is the country where we worked on that project. It was the micro-macro approach that we developed with Professor Terry Rowe, who was in the meeting, but he just left to bring his son from the airport.
I should add also that this work is based on a project we shared with Terry Rowe from University of Minnesota, with Rashid Dukali from Morocco, and with Biao from IFPRI. So, and it's well documented in a few of our previous publications that are cited.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. We have a question in the chat. The parallels between the climate in California and Israel are quite similar, with climate models showing a hotter and drier climate in the upcoming years. How do you think places like California should respond? During our last drought, we relied heavily on our groundwater. However, this seems unsustainable. Would investment in recycled water facilities be feasible, or should we be pricing water differently?
So, Tsur, do you want to answer with regard to Israel, and then I will step in with regard to California?
Yeah. So well, if you take Israel and place it inside the map of California, you'll get a small county, but it's like a small county of California. But the conditions are very similar. The climate is similar. We have we don't have the mountains in Israel, but the soil and climate are very similar. And what we have, I think, an advantage over California is that Israel is a relatively young country, so the water laws are young. They are and were designed by smart people that founded the State of Israel And in Israel, the water is all water belongs to the state. And the state plans and executes and prices and allocates and everything. And this is a huge advantage. And we, in the last 15 years, moved from agriculture that is based on natural water irrigation, natural water, to agriculture that is based on recycled water, and urban sector that is based on desalinated water. So now about 60 to 65% of urban water comes from desalination plants. About 65% of irrigation water comes from recycling plants. Recycling is tertiary level, so it's high level of recycling, almost no restrictions on the crops that can be used. And all this development has been taking place in the last 15, 20 years, that's it. As a result of the increased population and more frequent dry years and climate change scenarios that are not affecting the average rainfall, but are affecting the rainfall comes with more as an extreme in extreme events, and so less of the water can be used and can be is less effective. In Israel, even though the climate and the water situation is very similar, disregarding the scale, because of institutions and because of water laws and because of property rights and because of the ability to plan, I think we were probably ahead. Actually, Israel is #1 in recycling. Israel recycles close to 90% of the urban industrial water. The next, I think, #2, I think, is Spain. I think 20% or something like this. If I'm mistaken, please correct me. I don't know exactly in California, but maybe Ariel can.
Yeah, I will not be as detailed, but I would say, first of all, I think that Tunisia is ahead of Spain in terms of percentage of recycled water, urban water that go to irrigation. But now let's talk about California. California is indeed the potential for reuse of wastewater or the management of groundwater is enormous. And California has started, as we say, necessity is the mother of all invention and reform. So facing a prolonged drought between 2011 and 2017 has promoted several reforms in California, including the groundwater, the 2014 Groundwater Act that has changed the way that groundwater is being managed in California. And the second thing is the awareness and realization that wastewater has a value for different purposes, including irrigation and including irrigation of agricultural crops and irrigation of open spaces. California has started a program of what is called managed aquifer recharge, realizing that it can use some of the recycled water, not only to recycle, clean, and then dump them to the ocean, but also recharge them to aquifers that can later be pumped and being reused. So these two things, the managed aquifer recharged on one hand, the Groundwater Management Act, or what is called SEGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, both of them will have an impact on the way that California can face some of the negative effects of climate change that affects the availability of water and groundwater in the state, in my opinion, of course.
Good. We have a question from the audience. Rafina Sami Maria Saleh, you're up.
Yes, I think, yeah, good evening. I think good morning to all of you. And I'm really happy to attend this important event. And I think this work, even though it is not much time to have a very detailed presentation, the book is actually a very thoughtful and timely contribution, I should say, like all contributions of Ariel's are. And one of these few of ideas are really very interesting and have far-reaching implications. One is this water economy idea. Actually, I could not get a very full explanation, even though Tsur has presented that. But what it shows basically is the water economy is water is center and the rest of the things are behind. Just like even economic activities are also part of that the water economy, but they play the other role. So we view from a different thing. But one interesting idea is about the different types of water within this overall portfolio of water. Fresh water is one, and there are some water which has multiple uses. The same water is used twice or more. And so there is a kind of matching issues between different kinds of water to different needs or uses, with the underlying economic or cost implications associated with that. I think it's a very interesting concept. I think the water economy. The other idea I find very interesting. I hope a lot of these country-based examples will be supporting this, I'm sure, in the book. But the sequencing and packaging of different components, because now always we talk about policy as a monolithic idea or a concept, but actually policies are components. You know, various components are structured in a particular way, and the component or configurations are based on the cost and benefits, from a transaction cost theory perspective. So this, I hope these issues are there. I'm sure Ariel has actually motivated such kind of study earlier. And these two aspects, I find it very promising. I hope this work will be provoking more such work. I hope I will be able to read this book sometimes. Thank you. I don't want to take more time. And any response from Ariel or Yacov will be appreciated. Thank you.
So, do you want to respond?
Yeah, Well, I agree, of course. I thank you very much for the very kind comments. When we started to think about the book, we thought, we said, what will make the book, what will be the pivoting point, and what will make it something different than what we usually read in water economy books, because there are many water economy books. Water appears in different, also in different, in more general text, when we thought about the book, we thought that the thing that will make it well, a bit unique is the comprehensive approach. Looking at the water economy is what makes actually define this concept. Looking at the water economy as a whole and not in piecemeal, not particular parts of it, not in urban agriculture or trade between this sector and this sector, because everything affects everything. Water flows from based on gravitational laws, and the important part, or the basic of the book, are the water economy. And then from there, once we define all the ingredients and all the connections and the links within the water economy, we can then take and look at the connections and links between the water economy and the economy as a whole. So it's much easier to think about water policies in this way. This was the idea that guided us when we designed and wrote the book. But and I think your comments are exactly on this line.
Yeah. So let me just also very quickly say that Maria, thank you very much for the nice words. I just want to say that everything that I know so far on water institutions comes from the work that and the experience that Maria has shared with me, in addition to a very important concept, and the concept is who invented the exclamation mark. And this is something that we use for many, many years in our exchange. Actually, the concept of sequencing and packaging, not originally, but at least for me, the first time that was applied was in a paper with Maria, that concept, and then later, because it is so relevant, because most of the studies that we see, and certainly on groundwater, each policy intervention is used in isolation or by itself. I mean, the combination of different policy interventions that sometimes can create congestion in terms of the responses. But most of the analyses that have been published so far are dealing with each policy by itself, and the concept of packaging and then sequencing, which is not less important, when to trigger the use of that policy, that specific policy intervention, has not been seen. So we thought that this could be an important aspect. So anyway, this is what I would like to add to what Tsur has said.
Can I add a point? Can I ask? Can I add a point?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, the water economy concept, the framework allows this take the policies together. That makes the trade-off. Otherwise, if you say agricultural sector alone, you could not take the comprehensive approach.
Yeah.
So it is the water economy framework that allows the bringing together the policies, either in a particular sequencing or packaging, like that.
Yeah.
Actually, very, very impressive. And I want to congratulate and thank for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually in chapter 8, the two policies, water trade and international trade policies have been also analyzed in terms of what will happen if water market comes before water trade, before agricultural trade, and vice versa. So there is a lot of referral to that packaging and sequencing in the book.
True. True. In fact, when we talk about the water markets as a micro activity, but is it actually it's part of a larger water market, taking implicitly in terms of trade, in terms of virtual water trade, is a water market. So the whole thing comes up within the framework of water economy. So a single trade, within California, regions trading water is actually a part of a larger trading framework in terms of virtual water, like that. So that policy framework can be, bring to the. Thank you, Ariel. Appreciate it.
Gloria Gonzalez Rivera has a question. She did, but she may have left now. Gloria, are you there?
Oh, Gloria.
We have a
thank you, Gloria.
Another question in the chat, which is quite specific. So California recently legalized rainwater harvesting. Do you think this would be a useful tool, at least for non-potable water uses, considering California uses a large proportion of water for landscaping purposes?
So first of all, I didn't know that California legalized. I didn't know that it was not legal to harvest rainwater, but in my opinion, any type of, I know that in South Africa, for example, this is an important aspect of water harvesting as important aspect of the local community in terms of water sustainability. And I think that any source of water that can be used and not being wasted is important. The question, of course, is the benefit and cost that might affect the decision. And the question is how it is going to be done. And in California, probably less collection on roofs, but more collection on streets. And this could be an important new, or not new, but an additional source of water, yes. I think that our colleague, Ken Berenklau, if I'm not mistaken, he has done several studies on rainstorm collection, and this could be a beginning of some work that is probably very relevant. Of course, the question is the frequency of rainstorms in California, and sometimes you build a big reservoir, but the reservoir remains empty because you don't have the water that you need to fill it. So all of it is a question of benefit and cost that you need to weigh in.
I have a question, if you don't have any.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Ariel. Hi, Yacov. First of all, I would like to congratulate you guys. This is a great work. I'm looking forward to reading this book. I just wanted to ask whether you can elaborate a bit on that chapter that talks about the optimal water policy. If I think about kind of a South African context where you have a variety of institutions and a lot of other socioeconomic issues that might actually affect the way water policy is being implemented. Based on your different experiences, when it comes to implementing optimal water policies or optimal water strategies, to what extent those strategies will actually could be hindered by, different institutional setups. And I'm particularly thinking about, countries where you have different stakeholders working in the water sector. Thank you.
Okay, should I answer, Ariel?
Of course.
I'm not going to answer, but I will address. This is a very, very important and heavy issues that you raised, set of issues that you raised. And as I said in my introductory comments, in the book we take a very general prototypical approach because we want to build the essence, the basics, that they can then be adjusted to any particular situation. Any water situation is specific in terms of the water resources, the water users, well, water resources, yeah. So always the same resources and the same user, but in different climate, different quantity, different quality. The institutions are different, the water rights are different, the norms and the history. And so to apply this approach to any particular situation as the one that you described we will need to make some adjustments, but the basics are still there. And the optimal policy is, first of all, is intertemporal. We have to look at the water not as a static system, but it goes over time. We have to think of the infrastructure is very important. The infrastructure, the cost of the infrastructure in any water policy, in many cases, is more than 50% of the cost of water allocation. So the infrastructure and the investment. So we have a dynamic outlook, a dynamic approach. We look at the allocation in kind of general terms from the different sources to the different sectors, the different users, and looking at it in the medium run and the long run, how to develop the infrastructure. If we, for instance, want to rely more on recycled water, we have to develop and invest in the equipment, in the infrastructure, in the recycling plants. And this takes years. And we have to define the rights, and we have to define how we do it. And this will vary from place to place. In the chapters we use the Israeli example because the Israeli water economy is very developed, uses all the sources, and I think has done a fairly good job. So there's a lot to learn from it. So we use a lot the Israeli example, but if we want to apply these concepts to other water economy, to a different situation, we have to make adjustments. And they will be very specific, depending, case specific. So I can say that what we tried to do when we wrote the chapters, was to concentrate on the principles, on the basics that are universal. But then you have to add constraints, and you have water laws, and you have different property rights, and you have history, and you have different norms and rules that you have to bring in that will be incorporated in the form of constraints that will constrain. But the main approach and the main objective are there, described there. Ariel, do you want to?
No, I think that you covered very well the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gloria, did you have a question at one point?
Yes, but
Oh,
hey, Ariel, congratulations on the book.
thank you, Gloria.
Great to see all this effort in a wonderful volume. The question you have already answered, because what I wanted to know is overall, what are the lessons that we can learn for California, where we have a big problem with water, and in particular in the South? Is anything, I know that Jacob has been talking about principles, but anything specific from the policy point of view that we can apply to our region?
So I think that, you know, when you, earlier a little bit, I talked about it. So California, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is already taking some important steps. You know, California is much more complicated. The water economy of the state of California, with all the existing institutions and previous laws, are much more complicated than the case that Tsur talked about, the case of Israel. But as I view what is going on in the state of California in recent years, there is impressive progress, not without pain, but impressive progress both in recognition of the value of wastewater, even by users, not only by the regulators. And in previous years, when I used to talk with farmers in the Central Valley on the possibility of using wastewater rather than water from the state and federal projects, they used to tell me yuck. This was known as the yuck effect, and nobody wanted even to consider it. Today, especially in Southern California, when I meet with different water utilities, they tell me that there is a competition over recycled water that are almost at the level, in terms of quality, of almost at the level of fresh water. So there is a change in mind of even the users. So this is one thing. Another thing that I mentioned even before was the what is called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that has made a huge change in the way that groundwater in California is managed and developed towards sustainability. And we see now many changes that take place all over the state, not only in the management of groundwater, but even beyond that, for example, the introduction of groundwater water markets, that nobody was thinking about it before. So again, California and Israel face similar physical futures in terms of climate change, again, similar to some extent. And California is on the right way. You know, we can see that also in terms of total consumption of wastewater, which we can see that also in terms of building on considering in extreme cases the use of desalinated water, which again is the last resort in the chain of water supply. And this is what I can say.
Anil, do you have a question? You're muted.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Sorry, I joined in late. So Ariel and Yacov, you may have already addressed this issue. But you know, I know you yourself have brought up the issue of political economy of water in your past work. I haven't read this book, so I don't know if you discuss this issue at length in this volume. And I had a general question about this issue. I mean, by political economy, one of the things I mean is that in country after country after country, we see that the farm lobby has always had a very strong, inordinately strong influence. I would almost say stranglehold on national and domestic politics. You see this in low-income countries like India. You see this in high-income countries like the US and in high-income states like California. And this, I think, is what often results in pricing of agricultural water that is well below its scarcity value. So I feel like unless the hold on the farm lobby on national or state politics is somehow reduced, it will be difficult to have sort of rational water policy, at least in terms of its agricultural use. I wanted to sort of know your thoughts on this, and maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps the situation is already changing. You said things are changing in California. I don't know what the situation in Israel is, but I would like your thoughts on this.
I think that Tsur should tell about
comment
Israel.
on the, yeah, I can comment on the situation in Israel. If we look at Israel water economy, say in the past 50, 60 years, then 50, 60 years ago, this is exactly the situation you described was in Israel. There's cultural, all the cultural settlements and cultural farmers and producers were very strong politically, and they determined the allocation and the prices, which of course were very low. The prices were very low, but you cannot fool nature, and eventually the groundwaters, the aquifers were starting to go down, and as a result of that, we have the so-called the coastal. We have two main aquifers: the mountain aquifer and the coastal aquifer. Then we have the Sea of Galilee basin, and a few other small aquifers. And then, as a result, the coastal aquifer, which provided about a third of the world's natural water supply, started to get saline because of seawater intrusion, and the mountain aquifer started to be polluted. And the Sea of Galilee, we've seen years in which the water level went below what we call the red line, which brings in risks of eutrophication and things like that. So this brought a huge, big change. Politics cannot fight the real situation of scarcity. Eventually, scarcity takes over, and it takes time. I agree. It is not easy, and all the developments that I described in terms of recycled and using desalination and pricing. Now, the water for agriculture is priced at the cost of supply. But for this reason, growers are using mostly recycled water, which is much cheaper. And all this process and all these developments took place in the last 20 years as a result of a few severe droughts and facing reality. So in Israel, we went for rapid transformation from really a situation very similar to what you described, where politics determine most of water issues and prices and allocation, to a situation in which economists do that. Economic considerations, we have, and also we went through some institutional evolutions, reforms, heavy reforms in terms of the water institutions, which I cannot go into, but it is described in the book. So now in California is a different situation, because California, the institutions are completely different, the water rights are different. You have the mountains, you have more water, and then probably the politics is stronger, but maybe Ariel, you can comment on.
You know, I don't want to do comparisons between Israel and California because the book does not necessarily talk about, you know, there are some examples from Israel, but nothing on California. But the point that Anil raised is a very valid and relevant point. In many countries, farmers or agricultural lobby is very strong. We have the case in the book. We talk about Mexico and how farmers were able to reject all the government attempts to remove or reduce the subsidy for electricity for pumping groundwater at the cost of, you know, continuing the disaster that happens. And we know that this is the case anywhere in the world. You know, farmers want cheap water, and no matter what are the social costs of doing that. So it is indeed important to include political economy in analysis of policy reforms and see what is the best way to find a bypass or a change in the mind of farmers to have their support or to have their minimal objection to the policy.
Great. Yeah, thank you. But I'm also encouraged by Yakov's statement that ultimately scarcity trumps politics. So yes, so that's hopeful, because I see this situation in my own country, India, where the farm lobby has had a stranglehold on politics, and as a result, water pricing, especially rural water pricing, has been completely sort of biased and unrealistic.
Mm-hmm. And electricity subsidy for pumping groundwater for farmers.
Yeah. And has had disastrous consequences.
Mm-hmm. Disastrous consequences, yes.
So we have a couple of more questions. First from Kurt Schwabe.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate you two putting this on today. Really enjoyed it. And I want to also thank you for just your history of research in the area of water economics. It certainly has helped to move our discipline forward and given us a lot of insight to better manage water and this important scarce resource. Something that's kind of come up on my radar more recently, especially as I've moved into including municipal issues into my research, is this issue of affordability and how pricing structures have been asked to do a lot, right? And traditionally in our economics courses, we talk about pricing for efficiency. And more recently, we see, at least in the US, and maybe Yacov, you can talk about other experiences, although Ariel, you've done so much international work, you could probably provide some insight in this too, is there's a lot of effort to use our pricing structures to address affordability too. Have you seen any examples around the world where you can have a pricing structure that does that really well, where that efficiency equity trade-off is somewhat minimal? Or do you think we need to kind of just disentangle it completely and use a different mechanism, kind of borrowing upon what I think that's what's called the Tinbergen principle, right? For every objective, you need a different policy instrument or something. So I'll stop there and I look forward to hearing from both of you on this.
Okay. So do you want to answer or I will?
Yeah. What we address this in Israel, we address this. It's mainly for urban, for households, water for households, and we address it by tiered pricing. So we have it's complicated to implement, but we do it. We have a very low rate for what we define as subsistence quantity of water. For per person, actually. So each household has to report on the number of people in the household, and based on that, the pricing, when you get the water bill, you pay a very low price for the first allotment of water that is calculated based on the number of people in the household, number of persons in the household. So this is basically for subsistence. So obviously this water is subsidized. And then the water above it is paced according to the general rule for the cost recovery and so on. We also have similar in case of agriculture, though in agriculture, because it relies mostly on recycled water, and recycled water is much cheaper, there is a tier price as well for natural water there. So this issue of affordability is addressed by this type of block rate or tier pricing, which are not easy to implement. You need to meter the water very precisely. Its implementation is cumbersome, but we do it. Yeah, that's how we approach this affordability issue.
Yeah. So, you know, this particular topic probably will go into the second edition of the book. I am aware of one example, I think one very successful example of a pricing system that addresses the poor in Santiago, Chile, and by providing them with vouchers that they can, charging them the full price of water, but then providing them with vouchers to either pay for the certain amount of water or for, you know, becoming very efficient and using it. Nobody asks them what they do with that money. They can buy food or anything else. And this has been very successful. This is the only example, you know, except for special rates that are, of course, as Yacov suggested or alluded to, that are the case in some places, including also the state of Israel.
So we have time.
We do discuss this issue very briefly in the book, with exactly addressing the issue of affordability.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So we have time for one more question. From Steve Helfand.
Let me unmute myself. Congratulations, Ariel and Yacov, on the book. I very much look forward to reading it. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about what's in there on drought. Drought is something I've been starting to think a lot more about lately, and it seems like these kinds of extreme events are happening more frequently. And beyond just measuring drought in terms of frequency, duration, severity, etc., what kind of literature is there out there on the impact of droughts on productivity in agriculture or poverty or other kinds of things? And will I find a lot of guidance in the book on this issue?
So you have two parts to your question. First of all, if in the book there are, is drought part of the book? And the answer is, of course, yes. Scarcity and shocks of drought are part of several of the chapters and also of the general framework of the water economy that is the basis for the book. So yes, that's the first, the answer to the first question. And the second question, I think that you just need to find time to look into the literature, to look at effects of drought on productivity and on improved efficiency. And you will find many, many examples. And, you know, if you want to talk about it, you know, we can chat about it, and I can give you some ideas where to start with.
Good.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Well, I think that chapter 6 addresses this general
conjunctive views.
Conjunctive views, not maybe in the specificity that you mentioned, but Basically, the conjunctive use addresses fluctuation. Fluctuations can be intratemporal and intertemporal and include droughts, of course. And the idea is to use the stock sources as a buffer against periods of scarcity, and period of scarcity, drought is an example. So I think the chapter 6, the general framework exactly is suitable for addressing this type of questions. And in addition, when we look at the water economy as a whole, we have two additional sources that are stable: recycled water and desalinated water. And in the chapter 6, we discuss it. So this can also be enhance the stabilization role in conjunctive policies, the stabilization role of water stocks. So originally, when this literature is a long literature, started in the 60s by Oscar Bert and many contributors. But now, when we have the water economy, the comprehensive approach, I think, incorporating, and we discuss it in chapter 6, incorporating recycled and desalination, the role of recycled and desalinated water in conjunctive policies as stabilizing and smoothing out water supplies under intertemporal and intratemporal fluctuations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we should let our speakers go to lunch in California or wherever you are. It's later in the day, but thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Yacov and Ariel, for a really fascinating discussion.
Thank you very much, everyone, especially those who stayed late. And we hope that it was a good movie and you will dream about it now.